What you're about to hear is a story that starts with two 16-year-old girls, a dream trip to London, and a gate agent's devastating no. It's a story of prejudice, power, and a single, world-stopping phone call. A father, pushed to his limit, makes a decision that grounds an entire airline and costs billions, all to protect his daughters. He becomes a hero overnight. But what if the hero is actually the villain? What if the entire globally televised spectacle of justice was built on a lie? Stick with me, because the karma that comes back in this story isn't just hard, it's catastrophic. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 hummed with the electric promise of departure. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, multilingual announcements, and the muffled roar of jet engines. For 16-year-old twins Maya and Chloe Harris, it was the soundtrack to the beginning of their lives. Their first ever trip without their parents, a 2-week art and history tour of London and Paris, was just one boarding pass scan away. Maya, ever the more impulsive of the two, bounced on the balls of her feet, her box braids clicking softly against her shoulders. Can you believe it? In 7 hours, we'll be having actual tea and scones, not the stuff Dad gets from the fancy market. Chloe, the observer, offered a calm smile, adjusting the strap of her carry-on, which held her sketchbook and a well-worn copy of A Tale of Two Cities. Just try not to cause an international incident before we get there, she teased, her voice a gentle counterpoint to her sister's boundless energy. They were identical in appearance, the same high cheekbones, intelligent brown eyes, and radiant smiles that could light up a room. But where Maya was fire, Chloe was water. They were two halves of a perfect whole, and they were about to step into the world together. Their flight, Stellara Air Flight 110 to Heathrow, was boarding. The priority lanes were already clearing, and the main cabin line began to move. They approached the podium, their passports and boarding passes clutched in their hands like golden tickets. The gate agent, a woman in her late 40s with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read, Karen Miller, Gate Supervisor, looked up. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, flickered over them, and a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her posture. Her smile, which had been professionally courteous for the business class passenger ahead of them, tightened into a thin, straight line. Passports and boarding passes, she said, her tone clipped. Maya beamed, sliding the documents across the counter. Here you go. We're in 22A and 22B. Karen Miller picked up the passports, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on the covers. She scanned the boarding passes, then the passports. Then she did it again. A frown creased her brow. She typed something into her computer, her lips pursed. The line behind the twins began to grow, a restless beast of shuffling feet and impatient sighs. There seems to be a problem with your tickets, Karen announced, not looking at them, but at her screen. Maya's smile faltered. A problem? We checked in online this morning. Everything was fine. The system has flagged your tickets for a secondary security verification, Karen stated, the words sounding rehearsed and hollow. You'll need to step aside. Chloe spoke up, her voice steady. Step aside to where? Is there someone we can talk to? The flight is boarding. Karen finally looked at them, and her gaze was cold and dismissive. You'll step over there. She pointed to an empty space against the wall. And wait. We'll call you if and when we can clear this up. The humiliation was a physical blow. To be singled out, to be made a spectacle of in front of hundreds of people. They moved to the designated spot, their faces burning. They watched as family after family, couple after couple, scanned their passes and walked down the jet bridge. The line dwindled. The final boarding call was announced. Maya, her temper flaring, walked back to the counter. Ma'am, with all due respect, that was the final call. Our flight is about to leave. What is the exact problem? Karen Miller looked up, her patience clearly gone. Listen, young lady, your tone is not helping. The decision is final. Unaccompanied minors with tickets flagged by the system are a security risk. We are not allowing you to board this flight. Unaccompanied minors? Chloe joined her sister, her usual calm cracking. We're 16. Your airline's policy allows 16-year-olds to travel internationally without an escort. We checked it 3 times. It's not about the policy, it's about the security flag, Karen snapped back, her voice rising. And frankly, your agitated behavior is becoming a concern. That was the moment the floor fell out. It wasn't about a computer glitch. It wasn't about a policy. It was about them. Two young black girls, excited and energetic, were being painted as a risk, as agitated. The coded language was as clear as a siren in the night. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, hot and angry. Chloe wrapped a protective arm around her sister, her own eyes glistening with a steely resolve. We did everything right, Chloe said, her voice trembling but firm. This is not right. Karen Miller turned her back on them, beginning to process the final paperwork for the flight's departure. You can take it up with customer service. Now please move away from my podium. The jet bridge door was being prepared for closure. Their dream was dissolving in the harsh, fluorescent light of the terminal. Defeated, they retreated. The finality of the closed gate door was like a slap in the face. Maya was openly crying now, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Chloe, holding her own tears at bay, pulled out her phone. What are you doing? Maya sniffled. What they always tell us to do when we're in trouble and they're not here, Chloe replied, her fingers flying across the screen. She pressed the contact photo, a smiling man in a sharp suit standing in front of a glass building. I'm calling Dad. Marcus Harris was in the middle of a war room, though it was disguised as a 40th floor corner office with panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. He was CEO of Oralink Technologies, a name unknown to the general public but utterly essential to the aviation industry. Oralink didn't build planes. They gave them their senses. Their proprietary software and quantum communication network, OraNav, was the central nervous system for over 70% of commercial airlines in North America and Europe. It handled everything from real-time flight path optimization and weather avoidance to secure communication between the cockpit and ground control. Without it, a modern airline was essentially a fleet of very expensive, very heavy gliders. He was staring at a holographic data stream showing network stress tests when his private line, the one reserved for his daughters, buzzed with a unique vibration. His entire posture changed. The titan of industry vanished, replaced instantly by a father. Hey, sweethearts, you should be taking off any minute. Don't forget to send a picture from the plane, he said, his voice warm and full of paternal pride. Chloe's voice came through, strained and tight. Dad, they wouldn't let us on the plane. Marcus's world narrowed to the sound of that one sentence. What? What do you mean? Is there a problem with the passports? No, Chloe said, and then Maya's tearful, furious voice broke in. She said we were a security risk, Dad, a gate agent named Karen Miller. She just looked at us and decided. She called us agitated. She closed the door and left us here. Marcus Harris went very, very still. The data streams on the wall faded into an irrelevant blur. He could hear the deep, shuddering breaths of one daughter and the fierce, protective anger of the other. He had spent their entire lives building a world for them, a fortress of success and opportunity to shield them from the very poison that had just been spat in their faces. He had given them the best education, the best of everything, all in the hope that they would never have to feel as small and as powerless as he had felt so many times as a young black man climbing the corporate ladder. That fortress had just been breached. Chloe, he said, his voice now dangerously calm, put me on speaker and hold the phone up to the gate agent. Dad, she's not going to talk. Just do it, honey, please. A moment later, he heard Chloe's polite, steely voice. Excuse me, ma'am. Karen? My father would like a word. He heard the agent's exasperated sigh. I'm not speaking to anyone's father. The decision is final. Go to the customer service desk on the lower level. My name is Marcus Harris, he said, his voice projecting from the phone's small speaker with bone-chilling authority. You are the gate supervisor for Stellara Air Flight 110 at Gate B24. You have just denied boarding to my daughters, Maya and Chloe Harris, citing a non-existent security flag and their agitated behavior. You have 60 seconds to open that jet bridge door and personally escort my daughters to their seats. A dismissive, humorless laugh came from Karen Miller. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but making threats is not going to get you anywhere. The flight is closed. Have a nice day. Marcus ended the call. He took one deep, controlled breath. The father was gone. The CEO was back, but with a righteous fury fueling him. He pressed a button on his console. "Get me David Chen at Stellara, now." David Chen was Stellara Air's chief operating officer, a man whose life revolved around fuel costs, on-time percentages, and avoiding PR nightmares. He was in his car, heading home, when his phone rang with the priority code from Oralink. He answered immediately. "Marcus, hope all is well. Just looking over the latest efficiency reports from Oranav. Good stuff." "Forget the reports, David." Marcus's voice was like ice. "You have a problem, a big one. JFK, Terminal 4, Gate B34, a gate supervisor named Karen Miller." David's stomach tightened. This was not a social call. "Okay, what's happened?" "She racially profiled my 16-year-old twin daughters and denied them boarding on Flight 110. The jet bridge door is closed. They are stranded and humiliated. Your employee laughed in my face." David Chen went cold. He knew who Marcus Harris was, not just as a vendor, but as a force of nature. "Marcus, my God, I am so sorry. This is unacceptable. I'll get on it right away. We'll get them on the next flight, first class, full apology, you name it. I'll have Karen Miller's job on a platter." "The next flight is not an option," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The damage is done. The insult has been delivered. You have 10 minutes, David. 10 minutes to get that plane back to the gate, fire Karen Miller on the spot, and have your head of North American operations meet my daughters with a personal apology. If that plane's wheels leave the ground, I will consider it a breach of our partnership's goodwill clause." David was flabbergasted. "Marcus, that's impossible. The plane has pushed back from the gate. Bringing it back would cause a massive delay, a logistical nightmare. The FAA..." "You seem to think I'm negotiating," Marcus interrupted. "This is a courtesy call. You have a 10-minute window to contain a problem of your own making. That window started 5 minutes ago when my daughters first called me. You now have 5 minutes left." "Marcus, you can't be serious. What are you going to do?" "At the 10-minute mark, David, I'm going to make a phone call to my lead network engineer. I'm going to authorize the Sovereign Shield protocol. It's a fail-safe we developed in case of a catastrophic security breach. It allows us to remotely deactivate the Oranav software license for any client who poses a threat to our network integrity. In this case, I will be classifying Stellara Air as a threat." David Chen almost crashed his car. You would shut us down? You would ground my entire fleet? Over a gate agent's mistake? That's insane. That's illegal. It would cost us hundreds of millions. "It already cost me my daughter's peace of mind. That's a price you can't comprehend," Marcus said. "Your 5 minutes are nearly up, David. I'd suggest you use them." Marcus hung up the phone. He watched the digital clock on his wall. 4 minutes. 3, 2, 1. His console chimed. It was a text from Chloe. "Plane is pulling away from the terminal." Marcus closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Then he opened them, and they were devoid of all emotion except for a chilling resolve. He dialed his chief engineer. "Jacob, it's Marcus. Execute Sovereign Shield. Target, Stellara Air. Authorization code, Harris Alpha 110. Effective immediately." "Sir?" The engineer's voice was shocked. "That will ground their entire North American and European fleet. It will cause chaos." "I am aware," Marcus Harris said calmly. "Execute the order." Across the country in cockpits and control centers, screens connected to the Oranav network began to flicker. The first indication of the shutdown was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, chilling cascade of digital failures. On the flight deck of Stellara Air Flight 110, now taxiing towards the runway, Captain Michael Reynolds, a 30-year veteran pilot, frowned at his primary navigation display. The crisp 3D map of JFK's runways had just dissolved into a pixelated error message. License authentication failed. Network connection terminated. His co-pilot, a younger man named Ben, stared at his own screen. "What the hell? I've lost Oranav." "Switching to backup." He flipped a switch. Nothing. A red light blinked on the console. Oralink offline. Captain Reynolds grabbed his radio. "JFK ground, this is Stellara 110. We have a complete failure of our primary and backup navigation systems. "We are blind here. We are stopping on the taxiway." The controller's voice came back, laced with confusion. "Stellara 110, be advised. We're getting the same report from Stellara 45 to Chicago and Stellara 912 to Los Angeles. Stand by." Within 5 minutes, the standby had become a full-blown crisis. Every single Stellara airplane on the ground, from Seattle to Miami, from Boston to San Diego, was electronically crippled. Pilots could start the engines, but their flight management systems were dead. They had no flight plans, no real-time weather data, no optimized routes. They were flying blind before they even left the ground. For the planes already in the air, the situation was more perilous. Over the Midwest, the cockpit of a 787 Dreamliner en route from London to Dallas was suddenly filled with alarms. Their connection to the Oralink network, which constantly adjusted their route for wind speed and turbulence, was severed. They were forced to revert to older, less efficient radio navigation methods, immediately contacting air traffic control to declare a state of urgency. They could fly the plane, but they were flying it with 1980s technology in a 2025 world. At Stellara Air's corporate headquarters in Atlanta, David Chen's office became the epicenter of an earthquake. Red lights flashed on every monitor. His phone was ringing with calls from the FAA, airport authorities from across the country, and his own panicked operations managers. "What's the status?" he yelled, his face pale and slick with sweat. "It's a complete lockout," a tech officer shouted back. "Oralink has remotely revoked our license. Every plane, every hub. We're grounded. Completely. They pulled the plug." The financial and logistical fallout was instantaneous and brutal. Within an hour, airport departure boards were a sea of red. Canceled. Stellara Air's gates became chaotic vortices of angry, confused passengers. The airline's customer service lines were overwhelmed and crashed. The ripple effect began. Canceled Stellara flights meant thousands of passengers missed their connections on other airlines. Airport logistics, from baggage handling to catering, were thrown into disarray. By then, the story had hit the news, but the reason was still a mystery. Stellara Air suffers catastrophic system-wide IT failure, read the initial Chiron on CNN. But the truth was about to break, and it would come from a single, shaky cell phone video. Back at JFK, Maya and Chloe had watched in stunned silence as Flight 110 stopped dead on the tarmac. Then their phones began buzzing with notifications from friends. "What's going on with Stellara? Is your flight okay?" That's when a phalanx of officials, led by a man in a tailored suit who looked like he was about to be physically ill, came running toward them. "Miss Harris? Miss Maya Harris and Miss Chloe Harris?" the man gasped, out of breath. He was the head of North American operations, the man David Chen had failed to dispatch in time. "I am so sorry. There has been a terrible, unforgivable mistake." Behind him, security was escorting a stunned and ashen-faced Karen Miller away from the gate. Her career was over. The story was now clear to everyone at the gate who had witnessed the initial confrontation. Maya, seeing the chaos her father had unleashed, felt a dizzying mix of vindication and terror. She had started recording on her phone when the officials approached. She recorded the frantic apologies. She recorded the sight of her flight being towed back to the gate. She recorded the shell-shocked faces of the deplaning passengers. She uploaded a 1-minute clip to her Instagram with a simple caption: "This is what happens when you refuse to let 2 black girls on your plane for no reason." Our dad called. Stellara Air, flying while black. The video exploded. Within 3 hours, it had 1 million views. By the end of the day, 50 million. The narrative solidified. A racist gate agent had humiliated 2 innocent girls, and their powerful father, a tech CEO named Marcus Harris, had brought the corporate giant to its knees. The hashtag #StandWithHarrisGirls trended worldwide. Marcus was hailed as the ultimate girl dad, a hero who had used his immense power to fight injustice. He was David against a corporate Goliath, and he had won. Stellara Air's stock went into freefall, losing 30% of its value, a staggering $4 billion, by the time the markets closed. The company issued a groveling public apology, Karen Miller became the most hated woman in America, her face plastered everywhere. Marcus Harris, meanwhile, had dispatched a private jet to JFK. As Maya and Chloe boarded the sleek Gulfstream G650, leaving the chaos of the terminal behind them, it felt like a fairy tale ending. Justice had been served swiftly and decisively. They had been wronged, and their father had moved heaven and earth to make it right. As they settled into the plush leather seats and the jet climbed smoothly into the sky, finally on their way to London, they felt safe, protected, and vindicated. They had no idea that their father's dramatic act of vengeance was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening act of a much darker play, and the real consequences were just beginning to gather like storm clouds on the horizon. For a week, Marcus Harris was the most celebrated man in America. He played the part perfectly. In a carefully orchestrated interview with a sympathetic news anchor, he was the image of paternal strength and righteous anger. "My first, last, and only concern was my children," he stated, his voice resonating with conviction. "They were subjected to a type of casual, dismissive bigotry that I have fought my entire life to shield them from. When I heard the tears in my daughter's voice, every protocol, every business consideration went out the window. Any father, any parent, would have done the same if they had the means. I just happened to have a very specific set of means." The public ate it up. He was a modern-day folk hero. Memes were created depicting him as a superhero, the grounder, protecting his children from the villainous Karen the gatekeeper. Donations poured into civil rights organizations in his name. Oralink Technologies, once a B2B company unknown to the public, was suddenly famous, its name synonymous with power and justice. For Maya and Chloe, the first few days in London were surreal. Their story was on the BBC. They were recognized on the street. People would stop them, offering words of support. "Good for your dad," were they'd say. "He showed them." The initial trauma of the incident was quickly coated over by a thick layer of public vindication. Stellara Air had offered them a settlement so large it was laughable, which Marcus had publicly and performatively rejected, stating, "My daughter's dignity is not for sale." Karen Miller, meanwhile, was professionally and socially obliterated. Fired, she was also doxxed online. Her address was posted, and she faced a relentless barrage of threats. She disappeared from public view, a casualty in a war she had started but had no idea how to fight. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was unanimous and the sentence was absolute. But in the quiet, cluttered office of an investigative journalist named Evelyn Reed, a different narrative was beginning to take shape. Evelyn, a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her work exposing corporate fraud, had a finely tuned skepticism for stories that were too perfect. The hero-dad angle felt too clean, too cinematic. The reaction, she thought, was disproportionate to the offense. It wasn't that she doubted the girl's story. The racism they experienced was palpable in the video, a depressingly common occurrence. What bothered her was Marcus Harris's reaction. Grounding an entire airline, endangering passengers in the air, stranding hundreds of thousands, causing billions in economic damage, wasn't just a father's reaction. It was a thermonuclear event. It was like using a tactical nuke to kill a fly. Her journalist's instincts told her there was more to it. The fly, she suspected, must have landed on something Harris already wanted to destroy. Evelyn started where she always did, the money. She pulled up the public financial records for Stellara Air and Oralink Technologies. She spent 2 days poring over dense SEC filings, shareholder reports, and industry analyses. And then she found it, a small footnote in Stellara's most recent quarterly report. The company is currently in the final stages of renegotiating its primary avionics software and network contract set to expire on September 1st. We are exploring several competitive bids to ensure optimal value in technological advancement. The current contract holder, of course, was Oralink. The expiration date was just 1 week after the JFK incident. Evelyn's heart began to beat faster. This was the loose thread. She started making calls using her deep network of anonymous sources in the tech and aviation sectors. Her first few calls were met with silence. People were terrified of Marcus Harris, but Evelyn was persistent. She finally got a mid-level executive at a rival avionics company, Let's call them Aeronav Solutions, to talk to her, strictly off the record. Were you one of the competitive bids for the Stellara contract? Evelyn asked, her voice calm and disarming. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Look, I can't be quoted on this. You won't be, Evelyn assured him. Deep background. I just need to understand the landscape. The executive sighed. Not only were we bidding, Evelyn, we had won. We were 48 hours away from a joint press conference announcing the deal. Stellara was leaving Oralink. It was the biggest contract in our company's history. It would have been a massive blow to Harris. He was about to lose his flagship client. Evelyn felt a jolt of adrenaline. This was it. The motive. What was your bid? She pressed. Our tech is newer, our network is faster, and we were 20% cheaper. Harris had been gouging them for years. He thought he was too big to fail, that they were too integrated with his system to ever leave. He got arrogant. We were about to prove him wrong. Evelyn's mind was racing, connecting the dots. The timing was too perfect. Harris was on the verge of a devastating business loss and a public humiliation. His company's stock would have taken a massive hit. He needed a miracle, or a weapon. So what happened after the shutdown? She asked. The executive's voice turned bitter. What do you think happened? Stellara's board panicked. Their stock was in a death spiral. Their brand was toxic. They were facing a PR apocalypse. In the middle of the chaos, Harris comes back to them with a solution. He'll turn their systems back on. He'll help with the PR. He'll be their savior in exchange for a new 10-year exclusive contract at a 30% price increase. And they had to sign it within 24 hours. Blackmail, Evelyn whispered. Corporate extortion at the highest level, the source corrected. He turned his daughter's genuine pain into the most ruthless leverage I have ever seen. He didn't just nuke the fly, he used the explosion to vaporize his competition and seize control of the entire territory. The man isn't a hero, Ms. Reed. He's a monster wearing a girl dad t-shirt. Evelyn hung up the phone, her hands trembling slightly. The perfect story had just fractured, revealing something ugly and rotten underneath. Marcus Harris hadn't acted as a father. He had acted as a shark who smelled blood in the water, and he had used his own children as the bait. Now she had to prove it. Evelyn Reed knew that a single anonymous source, no matter how credible, wasn't enough to take down a public hero like Marcus Harris. She needed corroboration. She needed a paper trail. She needed someone on the inside of the Stellara Oralink deal to flip. She focused her attention on David Chen, the COO of Stellara Air. He had been publicly humiliated, forced to grovel on national television. His airline had been brought to the brink of collapse. If anyone felt betrayed by Marcus Harris's power play, it would be him. But he was also trapped. The new 10-year contract shackled Stellara to Oralink more tightly than ever. Speaking out would be career suicide and would likely trigger a catastrophic lawsuit from Harris. Evelyn decided on a different approach. Instead of going straight for the executives, she looked for the worker bees, the lawyers and accountants in Stellara's contracts department who had been forced to work around the clock to draft that new, extortionate deal. These were the people who saw the raw data, the red-line documents, the frantic emails. They were the ones who knew the truth and were gagged by NDAs in fear. Using a secure encrypted messaging app, she reached out to a junior legal counsel at Stellara, whose name she had gotten from a contact. Her initial message was simple and non-threatening. I'm an investigative journalist working on a story about the complexities of modern tech contracts in the aviation industry. I believe you might have a unique perspective. For 2 days, there was no reply. Evelyn was about to give up when a message came back late one night. I can't talk. Evelyn replied immediately. I understand. But the truth about the Oralink deal deserves to be told. The public sees a hero dad. I think there's another story, a story about corporate abuse. Another long pause, then, what do you know? I know about the Aeronav deal. I know you were hours away from signing. I know Harris used the incident with his daughters as a pretext to force a new, punitive contract on you. The response was a single, trembling word. Yes. Over the next week, the junior lawyer, terrified but driven by a guilty conscience, began to leak documents to Evelyn. They were explosive. There were copies of the final draft of the Aeronav contract dated the day before the shutdown. There were internal emails from David Chen to the Stellara board, dated the day of the shutdown, with the subject line, Urgent, Harris's Ultimatum. The emails detailed Marcus's demands in cold, hard terms: sign the new exclusive deal, or the airline remains grounded indefinitely. The most damning piece of evidence was the metadata. Evelyn's tech expert confirmed that the first draft of the Sovereign Shield protocol, the kill switch Marcus had used, wasn't created in the frantic minutes after his daughter's call. It had been created and tested 3 weeks earlier, right around the time it would have become clear to Marcus that he was about to lose the Stellara contract. He hadn't improvised a father's angry response. He had been sitting on a preloaded weapon, just waiting for an excuse to pull the trigger. The humiliation of his daughters wasn't the cause of his actions, it was the perfect cover. While Evelyn was building her case, the Harris family was beginning to fracture from within. The initial euphoria of their victory had faded, replaced by a strange and uncomfortable new reality. They were living in a gilded cage of their father's making. Their London trip felt less like a vacation and more like a PR tour. Marcus was constantly on the phone, not asking how their museum tour was, but asking how the media was portraying them if they were staying on message. Chloe, the quiet and observant one, noticed it first. She saw the way her father's eyes lit up when he talked about the Auralink stock price rebounding, a different kind of light than when he looked at them. She overheard a hushed, angry phone call he had with his CFO. Of course, the price was high. It was a hostage situation, and we held the gun. She felt a cold dread creep into her heart. She started looking back at the incident, not as a daughter who had been rescued, but as a piece on a chessboard. She remembered her father's strange calmness on the phone, his precise instructions. It wasn't the frantic worry of a scared parent. It was the cold calculation of a strategist. One evening in their hotel suite overlooking Hyde Park, she finally voiced her fear to her sister. "Maya, don't you think it's weird?" "What's weird, that Dad is a total badass?" Maya said, scrolling through positive comments on her Instagram. "No, that it was all so easy, so big," Chloe said, her voice barely a whisper. "He didn't just get us on the plane. He destroyed a company. He made billions. Doesn't that feel like too much?" "He did what he had to do. They messed with the wrong family," Maya shot back defensively. "But did he do it for us?" Chloe pressed, her eyes filling with tears. "Or did he do it for himself, and we were just a good excuse? Our pain, our humiliation, was it just leverage for him?" The question hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. For the first time, a schism appeared between the two inseparable sisters. Maya wanted to believe in the hero dad, the fairy tale. Chloe couldn't escape the feeling that they had been used. Their genuine experience of racism, monetized and weaponized in a corporate war they didn't even know was being fought. The foundation of their family, which had always felt like unshakable granite, was starting to feel like sand. And thousands of miles away, Evelyn Reed was typing the headline of her story, the article that would turn that sand into quicksand and swallow Marcus Harris whole. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning on the front page of the New York Times website. The headline was a cannonball, an act of love or corporate terrorism. Emails and insiders reveal how Auralink CEO Marcus Harris weaponized his daughter's racial profiling incident to secure a multi-billion-dollar monopoly. Evelyn Reed's story was a masterclass in investigative journalism. It laid out the timeline with devastating precision. It published snippets of the leaked emails. It had on-the-record quotes from aviation industry analysts and legal experts explaining how Marcus's actions constituted illegal market manipulation. It detailed the premeditated nature of the Sovereign Shield protocol, and it featured the heartbroken, anonymous testimony from the Aeronav executive who had his victory snatched away. The story didn't absolve Karen Miller or Stellar Air of the initial act of racism. Instead, it framed it as the spark that Marcus Harris had patiently waited for to light a fire he had already built. The article painted a portrait not of a protective father, but of a ruthless corporate predator who had expertly manipulated a moment of social justice to commit one of the most audacious acts of corporate extortion in modern history. The public reversal was immediate and brutal. The hashtag #StandWithHarrisGirls was replaced overnight by Harris Lied and Corporate Grifter. The same news anchors who had lauded him as a hero now stared gravely into the camera, dissecting his appalling manipulation. Late-night comedians who had made jokes about Karen the gatekeeper now ran skits portraying Marcus Harris as a villainous puppet master, pulling the strings of his weeping daughters. The story was no longer about a father protecting his kids. It was about a billionaire who used the very real pain of racism, a pain his daughters genuinely felt, as a smokescreen for his own greed. He had co-opted the language of social justice for personal gain, and in doing so, had cheapened the very cause he claimed to champion. The official karma came swiftly. The Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Auralink Technologies for market manipulation and violations of antitrust laws. The FAA, which had been investigating the shutdown, now refocused its inquiry with a vengeance, looking into the deliberate and reckless endangerment of the national airspace. Congress announced it would be holding hearings, and Marcus Harris would be the first person subpoenaed. His company, once celebrated, became radioactive. Clients began quietly reviewing their contracts, looking for escape clauses. Auralink's board of directors, who had initially celebrated Marcus's coup, now saw him as a monumental liability. They called an emergency meeting. The personal karma, however, was far more devastating. Maya and Chloe were in their hotel room in Paris, the final leg of their now tainted trip, when the story broke. Maya read it first, her face going from defiant confidence to chalky white horror. Every defensive argument she had made to Chloe crumbled in the face of Evelyn Reed's irrefutable evidence. The emails, the timeline, the premeditated sovereign shield. Chloe read it over her shoulder, but she didn't feel shock. She felt a deep, soul-crushing sadness. Her worst fears had been confirmed. They weren't the reason for the war. They were just the justification. When Marcus called them, his voice frantic and full of practiced denials, it was Chloe who answered. "It's a lie, girl," he began, his voice strained. "It's a smear campaign by my competitors. You know I did this for you. I would do anything for you." "Did you know you were going to lose the Stellara contract, Dad?" Chloe asked, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. The silence on the other end of the line was the only confession she needed. "Dad," she continued, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "A woman was racist to us. That was her ugliness. But you took our pain. You took the ugliest moment of our young lives and you put a price tag on it. You sold it to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder was you. Chloe, that's not fair, wasn't it?" Maya's voice, now thick with betrayal, cut in. "Was it fair that you let us become the face of this movement you created, knowing it was all built on a lie? We believed you. The world believed you." They hung up on their father. The two girls who had left New York so excited for their adventure now sat in a silent Paris hotel room, feeling more alone than ever. The fortress their father had built to protect them had turned out to be a stage, and they had been the unwitting lead actors in his play. The bond between them and their father, once their anchor in the world, was shattered. The hardest karma wasn't the DOJ investigation or the stock price. It was the look in his daughter's eyes that Marcus would see when they returned home. The look of two children who had just realized their hero was a fraud. The fallout was a slow, grinding demolition of a life built on power and control. Marcus Harris's appearance before the Congressional Committee was a public flagellation. Stripped of his corporate armor, he was just a man in a suit, stammering through evasive answers as lawmakers from both parties tore into him. The hearing was a ratings bonanza, a spectacle of a titan's fall. The Auralink board, under immense pressure from shareholders and federal investigators, forced him to resign. He left the company he had built from the ground up, not with a golden parachute, but with the threat of indictment hanging over his head. His photo was taken leaving the headquarters for the last time, a lone figure walking to a car, a stark contrast to the powerful images that had defined him just weeks earlier. Facing a mountain of legal fees and a potential prison sentence, Marcus was forced to liquidate a significant portion of his assets. The private jet was sold. The penthouse in Manhattan was put on the market. The symbols of his empire were dismantled, piece by piece. Stellara Air, now under new management and with the backing of a federal bailout, successfully sued to have the extortionate contract voided. They then signed a landmark deal with Aeronav Solutions, the very company Marcus had tried to destroy. The world he had tried to manipulate had rebalanced itself, leaving him on the outside. But the true reckoning took place not in a courtroom or a boardroom, but within the silent, cavernous halls of his Connecticut mansion. Maya and Chloe had returned from Europe and moved into the house with a quiet, heavy resentment that was more punishing than any argument. They spoke to him only when necessary. The easy laughter that once filled the home was gone. Chloe retreated into her art, her sketchbooks now filled with dark, fractured images. Maya, once so fiery and outspoken, became withdrawn and cynical, questioning everyone's motives. The trauma of the initial racist incident was now compounded by the trauma of their father's betrayal. He had not only failed to protect them, he had exploited their vulnerability in the most profound way imaginable. One evening, months after the scandal broke, Marcus found Chloe in the library. He tried for the 100th time to bridge the chasm between them. "I know you hate me," he began, his voice hoarse, "but I need you to understand. Everything I built for you, to give you a world where no one could ever make you feel small." Chloe didn't look up from her sketchbook. "But you were the one who made us feel the smallest," she said softly. "That woman at the airport, she didn't know us. She was just a bigot. You're our father. You're supposed to be the one person in the world who loves us without an agenda. You saw our pain, and your first thought wasn't, 'How do I comfort them?' It was, 'How can I use this?'" He had no answer, because she was right. In a strange twist of fate, Evelyn Reed's investigation led her to find Karen Miller, the disgraced gate agent. She was working as a cashier at a discount supermarket in a different state, having legally changed her last name. She was gaunt, aged, and terrified. Evelyn conducted a final, quiet interview. Karen didn't make excuses for her actions. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I was stressed, I was profiling, and I was horrible to those girls. I deserved to have lost my job. But I never imagined that it would be used like that. He fed me to the wolves to cover his own crimes." She wasn't a hero. She was a flawed person who had made a terrible mistake. But in the grand, ugly narrative, her sin had been dwarfed by the calculated, monstrous sin of Marcus Harris. Her story added the final, tragic layer to Evelyn's follow-up piece, humanizing a villain and further cementing the monstrosity of the hero. The story of the Harris twins ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, enduring sorrow. Marcus Harris ultimately avoided prison, accepting a plea deal that involved enormous fines, a lifetime ban from serving as an officer of a public company, and hundreds of hours of community service. He was a free man, but he had lost everything that mattered. His daughters eventually went off to college, their bond with each other stronger than ever, forged in the shared fire of their ordeal. But their relationship with their father remained a fragile, broken thing. They would speak on holidays, their conversations polite and distant. The warmth was gone, replaced by the permanent chill of betrayal. Marcus Harris, the man who could ground an airline with a single phone call, learned the hardest lesson of all, that you can have all the power in the world, but you can't command forgiveness. You can't buy back trust, and the deepest karma isn't losing your fortune. It's looking into the eyes of the children you claim to do it all for and seeing nothing but the reflection of your own colossal failure. In the end, this isn't just a story about a corporate showdown. It's a story about consequences. The gate agent's prejudice had consequences. But the father's response, cloaked in love but driven by greed, had consequences that were 1,000 times more destructive, shattering his company, his reputation, and the one thing he should have protected above all else, his family's trust. It's a powerful reminder that using a just cause for an unjust purpose taints everyone and everything it touches. The line between a hero and a villain is sometimes not about the action itself, but the reason why it was taken. Thank you for joining us on this incredible story. If you found this narrative as compelling and thought-provoking as we did, please hit that like button to let us know. Share this video with someone who loves a story about power, lies, and the hard reality of karma. And most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Was Marcus Harris a father first or a CEO? Let's discuss.